I'm going to show you how to take apart the front suspension just to change the shock and the spring if you want to lower your car, or just for replacing the shock or the spring. This car's already lowered on some Tokiko Blues. It has some generic coilovers on there, and what I'm doing, I'm going in and replacing this coil with, I have a ground control, an Eibach spring. It's part of the ground control set, 400 spring rate that I used to have on my track car. But we're putting it on here. I'm going to do 400 in the front, 350 in the rear, just for a nice firm feel. And I'm going to go ahead and remove everything right now. This is the first bolt you're going to remove. It's a 14mm head. I usually use a deep socket, a little 6-inch extension. Gives you enough room to ratchet and get it off. Next, we're going to remove the 17mm. It's the bolt down here. This is what holds the fork to the shock. You got the, it might be reversed on your car. Sometimes the bolt is put in from the rear, sometimes from the front. It doesn't necessarily matter. I always tend to put mine in from the front to the rear. It's a 17mm head and a 17mm nut. Sometimes getting off the shock, what I do, I take a hammer, just hit on it. You'll see it slide down from the shock, separate. It probably sounds louder than it is. I'm not really hitting that hard. And once that's off, you can move it around. I have energy bushings in here, so it makes it a little bit more difficult to maneuver around. And after that, go to the top. Depending on what kind of top hat you have, sometimes I see 17mm nuts. These are both 14mm. Just get your deep socket. Get both of those off. But make sure before you loosen all the way, go ahead and grab the shock because it's going to drop straight out. Reach your hand down in here, kind of hold it, and you just pull it straight out the back. Now, for stock suspension, I have aftermarket stainless steel brake lines. These didn't have provisions to mount it to the shock body itself. A stock one will have two 12mm bolts, and they hold the line. There's one in the front, one in the rear. You're going to need to remove those, obviously, before you can remove the shock. But since mine didn't have it, I almost forgot and almost skipped that step just in explaining it. There it is. Very easy to remove the front suspension on these 8891 Civic and CRXs. To get off your shock, if you want to get the top hat off, depending on the type of shock you have. Some will have this slotted where you can use a wrench, crescent wrench. The Tokiko Blues have the hex head, little 6-sided head, and I always use this. This thing has been used so much that I've bent it, and it still works perfectly fine. It's a little odd when I kind of hold the ratchet, but it works great. And the reinstallation is basically just the reversal of removing it. Now, when you're doing stock suspension, it can be a little bit more difficult because the spring is long, it's compressed, and it's a lot taller than something that is lowered, like a lowered coilover with the shock. And sometimes getting the fork on and then the control arm pushed back down to line up with the hole on the fork, and then the control arm can be a little difficult. You're going to need to push this down real hard. Sometimes you may need a second person. Sometimes you may even need to take off your sway bar. You can even, the radius rod. That way you can just lower the control arm. You could lower it from the front or from the actual ball joint side, but it's just a lot more work that way. So when doing a stock suspension, it might be a little easier if you have someone helping you. I've had friends before put their foot here, and they'll be pushing down on it while I go ahead and line it up and get it in. It is possible. It doesn't need to go that much, but it can be a little bit more difficult when you're doing stock suspension, so keep that in mind. One other small tip, I never tighten this until the car is completely sitting back on the ground. Once the suspension's all bolted up underneath, I will leave this just tight like that. That way it pushes itself up, and then I can really tighten it when the car is on the ground, because it'll push the piston of the shock back up to the top, and then you can almost spin this down all the way to the point where it's tight, and then it's not much more tightening up after that. Now we're going to work on the rear suspension. If you have an SI model, you're going to have a sway bar, which you're going to need to disconnect. It's the only main difference. Or if you have an 88 model Civic or CRX, the lower control arm is going to look different, whereas it's going to have an opening here and the shock is going to go between the control arm. It doesn't have the fork type shock. The first thing you want to do on the opposite side here, this right here, you have a little 14mm bolt. We're going to remove that one to disconnect the sway bar from the lower control arm. The next bolt you're going to want to remove, I always remove the shock one first. So we're going to get this one out. It's a 14 head. Now after you have that one removed, you have a choice. You can remove the one at the trailing arm, or you can remove the one that is attached to the subframe. I always do the trailing arm. It's just a little easier once this drops down to pull it out, especially when you have the sway bar. I disconnected it, but I just see how I lifted it back here, because when this part drops, it's kind of hard to lean the shock forward. It kind of hits the sway bar when the control arm goes down on this side. So my personal preference, I take off the one that's at the trailing arm. And after you have it out, you can kind of pry. Oh, mine didn't take much at all. Granted, I have an aftermarket lower control arm in here. These bushings slid right in really easily. The OEM ones might be wedged in there a little bit just from all the rusting and the water that creates all the corrosion, so it might be a little harder to pull out, but mine was really easy. The next step, you just need to go in the top. It's similar to the front. A little hard to see, might be a little dark. There's two 14mm nuts, but you need to take both of those off completely. And there it is, completely pulled out. On mine, I was able to just drop it straight down and then kind of angle it towards the end. It gave me enough room in between the sway bar and the little dust shield that surrounds the brake caliper. And that's pretty much it. I'm gonna go ahead and change these springs with the different set of springs on here, adjust the coilovers, and then reinstalling it, just slide it back up in there if you need to. Oh, another trick, a little tip you can do, you can disconnect the sway bar from the passenger side or driver side if you're working on the passenger side, and you can move this up and down. You'll be able to spin it all the way down if you want to do that before you put the shock back in. Let me go ahead and disconnect the other side and I'll show you what I mean. Loosened up the other side. This is what I mean. You can slide it up, and that should give you more than enough room if you come in at an angle back here. That's all you really would need to get your suspension up in there, because I can't go down all the way on mine. If you didn't have the sway bar, mine's hitting it where it's attached to the lower tie bar. So I could remove that, but I don't want to. I don't need to. This gives me more than ample room to slide the shock and spring back up there and get it finished back up.